Go. Okay, today we're starting to come to the end of this unit, Unit 11, blood. We're going to do diseases and disorders of the blood. All of these are pretty much genetic, so you really can't catch it. First one, if I can get my screen working, is going to be anemia. Is anyone here anemic? A couple of you. All right. So I know Zoe says she was too. I'll explain to you guys exactly what anemia is. You didn't really do anything to incur this. It just happens. Anemia is when you don't have enough red blood cells to carry an adequate amount of oxygen. If you look at the image on the top, that'll be like a normal level of red blood cells from a sample. And then below that is an anemic blood sample level. Anemic just kind of means weak. You know, if you were on the basketball team and you were playing at 10%, your coach would probably say, Will, your performance is anemic at best. It's weak. It's less than to be desired. When you have anemia, as far as your blood, you have less red blood cells than you should. Your red blood cells carry oxygen.
I have a question. What was the side effect?
What are we talking about today, Will?
Blood disease.
You're on the recorder, by the way.
It's blood diseases.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
That was blood disease. Blood disease.
Okay.
Or is it disease?
I have a question real quick.
Hold on, Cooper.
Okay.
The symptoms typically include fatigue. Olivia, if you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but can I ask you a question about your anemia? Okay, do you feel tired at all? Like when doing what? Someone in the second period said when they go up and down the stairs here, they get tired.
I get tired.
What about you, Aiden? Anything? Everything? Yeah, they got the thyroid thing. Well, one of the main signs is fatigue. When you are supposed to have blood cells that carry oxygen and you do activities that consume oxygen, like physical exertion, you're gonna be a little out of gas. You're gonna feel out of breath. You don't have a whole lot of red blood cells compared to normal levels, delivering oxygen to every cell in your body from head to toe. Cooper, what's your question or comment?
I was gonna ask, when you say healthy erythrocytes, do you mean like they have the same amount as another person, or
Okay, they may have the same amounts, they just don't work right,
Okay.
or they could just not have as many as a
So it
normal
could be
person.
either one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now the main factor with anemia is the protein in red blood cells that actually allows the red blood cells to carry oxygen. Can any of you raise your hand and tell me what is the name of the protein that is in red blood cells that allows red blood cells to carry oxygen? Julia? Hemoglobin. And what element on the periodic table, number 26, is the element that actually allows hemoglobin to carry the oxygen?
Iron.
Iron. You're all supposed to have iron in your blood. And you can actually get iron from food like red meat. Red meat is typically from a cow, and you're eating the muscle of cow. There's blood in muscles. Anybody like their steaks and burgers really rare, like bleeding? Some people might say, man, it kind of has like maybe a tiny bit of a metallic taste to it. That's the iron. That's iron-rich food. So that's how you can get some extra iron in your system. The young lady in my second period says she takes iron supplements because she has anemia, and that helps get her iron levels up. If your iron is up, you can carry oxygen. If you can carry oxygen, then you're getting your oxygen in your cells. So here's the other type, iron deficiency anemia. Iron is element number 26 on the periodic table. It's a key element in your blood. It actually allows hemoglobin to carry oxygen. I want you guys to know the hierarchy here. Iron is needed for hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that is in your red blood cells. Without iron, oxygen will not be carried by hemoglobin. Last week, we said that in one, let's see if you remember, what you guys remember from all the way in 4 days ago. How many oxygen molecules can one hemoglobin molecule hold?
100 million.
No,
Oh,
4.
four.
One hemoglobin molecule can carry 4 oxygen molecules. Do you remember how many hemoglobin molecules there are in one red blood cell?
100 million.
250 million. So what is 250 million times 4 oxygens? 1 billion oxygen molecules per red blood cell. That's a lot of oxygen. So you have to have iron. Very important. People that have anemia tend to be prescribed iron supplements. They don't have a lot of iron. They need to get it from someplace. Yesterday, Zoe said she's donating blood next Wednesday, but she has low iron. So I told her they're probably going to give you a cookie and maybe a little juice box and say, thanks for coming. We can't use your blood. Because quite honestly, to put it as plainly as I can, your blood is not good at what blood is supposed to do. It's like trying to hold a bunch of groceries when you don't have any arms. Can't really do it. So people that have low levels of oxygen or low levels of iron or low red blood cell counts are typically discouraged from donating blood because there's really nothing they can do with that. So thanks for the generosity. Your heart's in the right spot, but we really can't do anything with your blood. Iron deficiency is common cause of too few healthy erythrocytes in the body. The symptoms again are fatigue. And if you have iron deficiency anemia, you can just take some iron supplements and focus on any of the underlying causes. Maybe it might be another disorder you might have. Perhaps you're not getting enough iron in your diet. When we're done with this, I'll show you a clip from an X-Men movie with iron in the blood. Like the clip. Yes, Aiden. Probably. See why not. That brings me a question I'm going to ask you guys tomorrow. Just totally out of the blue. If I have a vial of all your blood, I've spun it in a centrifuge, for like 60 seconds, and your plasma is on the top. That's the majority of your blood, that creamy yellowish stuff. Creamy color. It's not creamy like whipped cream. It looks like a cream color. It should be a liquid. What's all the red stuff on the bottom called? Don't say red blood cells.
Erythrocyte.
No, not erythrocytes. Give me the name of that, the red portion. Hematocrit. That's a word that seems to be a mental block with a lot of people. You're gonna need to know that for Thursday.
What does
We'll go over tomorrow.
crit mean?
Crit. Hematocrit. I'm not sure, Cooper. You caught me off guard. I had to look it up. Are you proud of yourself?
Yes.
Okay. All right, here's one I know most of you have heard of before. This is called sickle cell anemia. Now, the fact that anemia is in the title means that there will be a deficiency of oxygen transport. This is a mutation. Does anyone know what continent this mutation arose in? Africa. Mutations are totally random. Totally random. And then mutations can be caused by mutagens, which are mutation-causing substances. This was totally random. Africa has a big problem with malaria. Malaria is a bloodborne disease that is spread by mosquitoes. It's a parasite. The parasite is called Plasmodium. What happens is when mosquito sticks its proboscis, which is this like little nose, into your body, it releases the malaria parasite. It's just a vector. The mosquito is not doing this on purpose. It's just that the mosquito is basically dirt. And it releases the malaria parasite into your blood. The malaria parasites will find your red blood cells, kind of burrow into them, reproduce inside your red blood cells until your red blood cells are basically a big malaria nursery, and the red blood cells explode, releasing hundreds of little malaria parasites, and they go and find other red blood cells and continue the life cycle, do it over and over and over, knocking out your red blood cells one by one by one, and eventually you do become anemic. Malaria can kill you because you're not getting oxygen throughout your body. Your red blood cells are being destroyed. So with all that happening, a totally random mutation. No one in Africa goes, okay, I need a defense against malaria now. Come on, body mutate. It's just totally random. No one can control their mutations. There's a mutation that arose in a population of humans in Southeast Africa, where their cells became sickle shaped. And if you look at this actual slide of blood, you can see the cells that look like little hooks or little crescent moons. Those are sickled cells. The red blood cells went from a donut looking shape to a sickled crescent moon shape. They cannot carry oxygen like this, but they also cannot get infected by malaria. So that's like the good thing. I can't get infected by malaria. The bad news is you can actually die from things like blood clots and anemia from deoxygenation. You can be hypoxic. You remember that term hypoxic? What does that mean? Not enough oxygen. Yep. Oh, my patient is hypoxic. They have low oxygen. I have had thousands of students in my career as a teacher. I've had maybe less than 10 with sickle cell, all African American, because it originated in Africa. It didn't originate in Australia or Latin America or Europe. You typically see it in people that descended from Africa because that's where it originated. I told you guys that you have blood vessels called capillaries that are so small. Red blood cells have to travel single file to get through. These sickled cells can cause big blood clots. A blood clot could form in your brain or your arm or your heart or your lungs, and that can be deadly. They can damage your kidneys, your spleen, your other organs. One thing I didn't know at the time is one day it was a really cold day, like it was a few days ago, and school is over, and there's this girl that was staying in the building. And I was like, school's over, you got to go home. You got to wait for your ride outside. She says, I can't. And what do you mean you can't? I have sickle cell, and if I go outside in these temperatures, my cells will start to change. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, stay inside. I had no idea. It was like the 30s. It was a really cold day in Florida. And she had to stay inside until her ride was there, because if she spends too much time in the cold, her cells will go from a round shape to a sickle shape. Something I was not aware of. Yeah. There you go. Not distributing enough warmth. Makes sense. When you have your cells become this hook-like sickle shape, they can't carry oxygen. And that's where the anemia comes into the title of the disease. I'm going to show you a video at the end where the only way that you can actually cure this is if you correct the mutation. Mutation is a typo in your DNA. If you recall anything from freshman bio, how many letters are there in DNA? Not the actual word, but the actual strand of DNA. How many bases are there? 4. Adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. In sickle cell, the entire genetic sequence that is responsible for making your hemoglobin, there's 147 amino acids that make that protein. 1 amino acid has a typo. So whatever 147 times 3 is, let me see. Oh, blah. 147 times 3 is 441. Out of 441 bases, like adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine, one of them is a typo. There's a T where an A should be. And that causes sickle cell, one mutation. So I'm going to show you a video where they actually are learning how to go into your DNA and correct the typo. It's like going into a project you're typing up, you find a typo in one of the words you spelled, you enter your project and you just correct it. Well, how do you do that with DNA? We're finally figuring out how to do it. And so you could effectively cure diseases like sickle cell. And I'll show you a video on that when we're done here. Next one is hemophilia. Hemophilia is a sex-linked trait. If you take in my bio class, when we talk about sex-linked traits like color blindness, hemophilia is the same thing. You typically, but not always, you typically inherit it from your mother, and boys inherit it more than girls because girls have 2 X chromosomes, boys have 1. Hemophilia is basically an inability to clot while you're hemorrhaging. What is the simple word for hemorrhaging? Bleeding. Hemorrhaging is the words they use in medical offices and hospitals. I'm hemorrhaging internally or externally. When you have hemophilia, you can have spontaneous bleeding. I've definitely had students with this before. They'll be sitting in the desks like you are now, and all of a sudden their nose starts bleeding. Just totally random. Nosebleed. They weren't picking their nose really hard and broke their skin. They just nosebleed. It happens. You see some of the other symptoms. Nosebleeds, bleeding gums in the mouth, swollen and stiff joints, bruises, coughing or vomiting blood, blood in stool or urine, and heavy menstrual bleeding. Those are all signs of hemophilia. You really don't, just like anemics don't have a lot of red blood cells or a lot of iron, hemophiliacs don't have a lot of platelets and clotting factors. Okay. Essentially. All right, leukocytosis. This is having too many white blood cells. Jesse, if you're sitting there healthy as can be, feeling pretty good, how would you describe the levels of white blood cells in your blood? High or low? Low. But when you're feeling sick, they're probably high. For those of you that have had recent illnesses, if I were to take a sample of your blood level will likely be higher than normal. That's expected. Your white blood cells are your soldiers. When you have an invasion of a pathogen, you need soldiers to fight them off. But if you're sitting here normal and healthy and fine, and you have a high white blood cell count, that could be leukocytosis. And it could be a sign of something worse. You shouldn't have high white blood cell counts when you're feeling healthy. They are only needed when you are sick. Could be a sign of cancer, things like leukemia. Leukemia is where white blood or leukocytes come from your bone marrow. If you have leukemia, you need a bone marrow transplant. Apparently, there's a mutation in your bone marrow that is causing too many white blood cells to be produced. So you need to pull out that old bone marrow and replace it with healthy bone marrow so you won't produce too many white blood cells. Yeah. Bone marrow. Because that's where blood comes from. All right. Thalassemia. This is where you have low levels of hemoglobin. What color does hemoglobin allow your blood to be? Red. When you have low levels of hemoglobin, you're not going to have like the normal reddish colored blood. It's going to be kind of like pinkish. Hemoglobin has iron, and that's what allows you to have red blood. Without the hemoglobin and iron, you're not going to have the classic red blood. So you can see the normal cells versus the thalassemia cells. And the last one I have for you is von Willebrand disease, which is actually more common than hemophilia. The symptoms are very similar. It's a clotting issue, but it is more common than hemophilia. Von Willebrand disease. It is not sex-linked, which means it's more likely to be passed on. Hemophilia, I think this disease is like 1 out of 1,000, while hemophilia is like 1 out of 10,000. So this is more common.
Did you just have like low platelets without having either one of those?
I imagine, but I mean, there's got to be a diagnosis there. So how is this different than hemophilia? You might be wondering. Here's what I have. You don't need to write this down. The most common hereditary coagulation abnormality is about 1% of the population. Symptomatic patients can be severely ill and need regular replacement therapy. Replacement therapy means they need blood transfusions. For those of you who don't need any blood next Wednesday, these are the types of people that need it. They need constant blood transfusions because they bleed a lot and they need to replace their blood. It does not usually cause bleeding into joints or internal bleeding, whereas hemophilia is much rarer. 1 out of 10,000 births is difficult to diagnose because it is X-linked. You have different clotting factors, and clotting factors are in your genetics, and they can either allow you to clot or not allow you to clot. My brother-in-law has a factor 5 mutation. There's different clotting factors: factor 3, factor 4, factor 8. He has factor 5, and he actually clots too well. He could worry about clots forming in his blood. So that's his mutation. We all are mutants in our own way. His mutation is a factor 5 mutation, where rather than having a clotting deficiency, his body's too good at clotting. And that could be bad because you don't want blood to clot in your blood vessels. Like I showed you the video last week with that massive blood clot that pulled out of an artery. And that was intense. All right, that is it for this lesson. So
You showed us that.